Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for having me here. Thank you, Revenue Cat, for sponsoring this event. I thank you for the meetup for allowing me to present my presentation today, and as well for the audience. I appreciate you guys coming out today to listen to the presentation. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and jump ahead a little bit. Sorry. Yep. Analog by NOSSAFLEX. My company is NOSSAFLEX, and our app that I'm going to present today is Analog. Analog is just a simple app for film photographers that allows us to keep track, or I guess the user to keep track of their film photography metadata. So this is the analog journey. A few achievements I wanted to highlight for our app is that we got accepted into the Apple's entrepreneurial camp, and that was a great success for us. We learned a lot from Apple and their team. We got our app actually audited for the design as well, so we got a lot of feedback. So I'm hoping to share some of that feedback with you guys as well, so you could take that to your apps and your side projects and make with that what you can. We were also featured on Apple's websites for a while when they had the entrepreneurial camp displayed, which was a big achievement for us as well because that's to me signified our app got Apple's seal of approval. They liked our app, they liked what we were doing, and they were promoting us. And we managed to go to WWDC 24, and that was great. I remember, I think Revenue Cat, Charlie, I think you were there for WWDC 24 for yep, you were there. I remember you, and we went to the what was it the meetup that you guys hosting. It was great, solid by the way. So thank you for that again. So let's continue forward. So with our app, right? What was the problem with film photography? The film photography itself is beautiful, but it's a huge mess to keep track of. With film photography, there's no built-in way to keep track of data. Lab scans we get come back with meaningless file names, and you're able to handwrite notes. So what I mean by that, you could write down shutter speed, your aperture, your focal length, your camera, all that information on a piece of paper, but it's very easy to lose track of that. So there's really no simple system for organizing film metadata. So our solution was analog. Our app allows you to keep track of rolls and shots effortlessly. It also, the built-in light meter automated that process for keeping track of your metadata and much more. It allowed you to keep track of saving your cameras, lenses, your ISO, shutter speed, your location, the reference photo, and so much more with that. This app was also designed by photographers, by our team. We're all photographers. We shoot film, we shoot digital. We love photography, and we wanted to create an app that users have a similar experience and they can feel that joy of love for photography. And again, we this app was designed helped this app with Apple design team. They helped us audit and refine it so that way we could meet the needs of the users and make it very inclusive for users. And what makes our app special and I think stand out compared to other like note-taking apps or film photography apps is that it uses our NOSSAFLEX system. So what is our NOSSAFLEX system? It's a system that we designed to help you organize your film photography. NOSSAFLEX itself is actually your acronym. So if we break it down, NO stands for number, SS is shutter speed, aperture is A, FL is focal length, and then EX is exposure. So it's kind of hiding behind this Zoom thing right here, but over here we have an example of what we could use this NOSSAFLEX system for. We could actually rename files with the metadata that we capture for your film photography. So in this case, this was shot on the roll named Cape May. The number of the shot was number 9. The shutter speed was 1/25th of a second. The aperture was 8, and I don't know if you can see. I guess you can't see it from here, but it says FL 90, which is the focal length of the lens, as well as the exposure compensation, which was +1. So who are we? Why should you support our team? We're actually an international team. Don is one of our lead front end developers for NOSSAFLEX or for Analog specifically. He helped implement a lot of the design for what we designed for NOSSAFLEX. He's based out of Singapore. We have Josh, who's the head of design and as well as social media and marketing and stuff like that. And then there's me. I'm the lead iOS engineer for this app itself, and I'm based out of Richmond, Virginia. So a little bit of the technical breakdown, what's underneath the app, what drives it. So we built the app, we started it in 2020, and at that time, Swift UI was still fairly new. It came out, 2019? So it was still a little buggy at the time. So we implemented Swift UI with UIKit. And we'll break it down a little bit more in the next slide of like how we did that. The backend is built with Firebase. So that's what we're using to store all the data. So like lens, cameras, shots, rolls, etc. And we're using Core Data and File Manager to keep track of the reference photos, or not to keep track, but to store the reference photos. Core Data is actually keeping track of the metadata for that shot. So that way we could easily associate each shot with the photo. And we're doing it this way, so that way we can store the photos locally and users are able to easily access that photo without having to wait for networking or anything like that. We're also using user defaults for keeping track of user settings. So for filtering on the roles, or if they want to enable the camera, disabled location, etc. And we're also using a library called Lottie, which is by Airbnb. And all that does, it allows us to create animations through um, After Effects, export it as JSON, and integrate it into our app using the Lottie framework. And it's been great. Here's an example of one of the animations that we create. It's not animated because it's a screenshot, but in the app you could see it. Josh created this and it looks great. And I think it like adds a lot of texture to the app itself without adding too much either. We're also using Swift SMTP to allow users to send the roles that they're taking straight through email. So that way they can organize their photos on their desktop. And another thing that we're using as well is core location map kit to keep track of the shots, where they're shot for the user. And this is good metadata for the user that obviously is not being tracked with film photography. So we went ahead and implement that for the user. There's a lot more underneath the hood, but I think these were good highlights to get started with the application itself. So moving forward, right? Under the hood, front end. What we initially started building the app with 60% Swift UI, 40% UI kit. And today it's about 90% Swift UI and 10% UI kit. The majority of the UI kit components that we're using were for the light meter and also like these horizontal pickers that I had to create specifically for the light meter. That was not doable at the time with Swift UI. I want to go back into it and implement it in Swift UI, see if I can manage it, but currently is in UI kit. And I did write a Medium article. If you guys are interested in that, I could send it your way. How I did that, it's very specific. I use the basically UI collection view and I just paginate in it. And it works really well. If you ever use the app, play with it and let me know what you think of it. But our goal with the UI itself is to eventually convert all the UI to be fully Swift UI. The reason why we want to do this primarily is there's a tool called Skip, and I messed around with it with another project just to see how it works. And this tool, Skip, actually allows developers to build native apps for iOS and Android with a single code base using Swift and Swift UI. Currently, we can't use it because we have a lot of components that are built in UIKit as well. So that is kind of like a hurdle for us to overcome. Until we're able to fully develop with Swift UI for the app, we won't be able to do that. So I'll talk later down in the presentation our other solutions for developer for Android. Still working on that. I'm trying to not avoid Android, but we're at the point where we kind of need to do it now. And another reason why we love Swift UI as well is that it aligns with Apple's design, right? So the recent release with Liquid Glass UI, we were easily able to just update the app and get a lot of the UI, the Glass UI components into the application without any headaches, and it was great. A lot of the UI kit components still are using the previous generation design, so it's kind of um, there's that hurdle. So I want to, again, if we could migrate to Swift UI, that'd be really nice. And also just a smaller code base. It's easier to maintain versus UIKit. I love UIKit. Don't get me wrong. I'm not throwing any shade. I started developing UIKit years ago before Swift UI, but I see where Apple is leaning with Swift UI, and I think that is the future. So we're going to try to migrate our application to that. And here's some examples, right? So how we're using UIKit with UI, Swift UI. So for the light meter, we're basically just wrapping the light meter view controller with the UI view controller representable. And with that, it allows us to easily integrate that into Swift UI. With the UI view controller, you're not able to modify the navigation bar for the title I know you can't see it here, but the shot title, that button as well. Um, you weren't able to access that through the UI kit, so you had to do it through Swift UI. And the way we're doing it is just adding the toolbar and just adding the components and worked really well, surprisingly. And yeah, it was a great solution for us. Another example as well, the inverse of that, where we're using Swift UI components in UIKit, is where we're setting up a stack view. So on the interface itself, where it says role name, focal length, aperture, this is all, it was all UIKit, but we updated the role name and the focal length to use a Swift UI component. And we're just wrapping our UI hosting controller, and we're easily able to integrate it into the view controller. And it worked flawlessly, it worked really well. So I want to do a little technical breakdown of like the design history. Before analog existed, we had our app loose. This was when it was just Don and I working on the application. We're not designers by any means. We're engineers. So this was the initial design of the app. I cringe when I look at it a little bit today compared to what we're at now, but it was basically the foundation to where we're able to get to today. And I mean, people were interested. There was an article that was written about the application before it was fully released, so that gave us motivation to actually want to continue this journey. The next iteration, we tried to use a neuromorphism, and this was back in I think what 2020 when neuromorphism was kind of trendy. It was cool to mess around with, but it kind of felt like it felt tacky and a little gimmicky. It was fun to experiment and pressing the buttons were super satisfying, but ultimately it didn't really align with the vision with where we wanted to take the app. We wanted the app to feel like almost like you were writing on a piece of paper, as close to that as we possibly can. Of course, you're using that mobile application, so you're gonna there's gonna be some resistance, but the closer we can get to that, the better we are aligned with our vision. So that comes to our next iteration of the design. And I love this design much more. It's much more mature. Didn't really follow Apple's interface guidelines with this, but it still looked good. So we're getting closer, but we weren't fully there yet. The result with this is a little cluttered and hard to navigate the display. And I really like this design because it reminds me of Ableton. I don't know if you guys ever messed with it, but it just gave me some familiar feeling with the colors and everything. And yeah, I thought it looked good, but it had it needed some more improvements, which leads us to the version 3, version 4. And I put version 3, version 4 because we just recently updated to support Liquid Glass UI or Glass UI. This one, we prioritize the human interface guidelines when we created this application or this version of the design. And this was actually inspired by the reminders app on your phone. Like when you just get a new iPhone, has reminders. This was completely inspired by that. One thing that we learned from Apple, from the Apple entrepreneurial camp, was you should design apps that feel familiar to people. And that's why we felt confident to do something very similar. It's not exactly the same. We added our little spin to it in our taste, and I think it turned out really well. And it gives you everything that you need without having to have the tab bar at the bottom. And it works really well. I was really proud of how that came out. This was also reviewed and refined by Apple's designers when we went through the camp, and it was great. We got a lot of feedback. There was some stuff that we changed, like for example, the text over here was the complete would have been covering the 8, and it would have been in the center. It looked good, but it wasn't following the design guidelines. That's just one example of like feedback that we got from Apple, but we got plenty that we're able to update and correct. And it looks again, I'm very proud of the result of it. Continuing forward, so one of the tech breakdowns, there was a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about with the app, so it was kind of hard for me to cherry pick what I was going to talk about. I think one of them that would have been good was image storing. Like how are we handling that? We currently have only the free version right now on the App Store, which stores photos locally using File Manager and Core Data. Core Data is just managing the metadata, which stores the image URL and as well as other data for that photo. And we're using File Manager to actually store the photo. This just results in like a much speedy and snappy way to retrieve photos without having to wait for, again, like on the network or anything like that. With the premium version that we're working on currently, we're gonna still use the local storage, but we're gonna use Firebase to back up the photos through the cloud. And what this will allow us to do is one, cross-platform support, and also it will allow for Android development in the future. Because we initially went with iCloud, with iStorage, and it worked wonderfully, but it's not viable for Android. So we want to kind of future-proof the application with that. And it also, yeah, like I said earlier, enables reliable cross-device access. So let's say you get a new iPhone, all your images that you have stored on here will easily get migrated to the next application. And again, I have this working on my current phone, but it's not currently, it's still in development, if you will. Some concerns we have about it as well is just making sure that we're caching everything properly. User privacy and data security, that's a big thing for us as well, because we want to make sure that you guys feel confident with where your photos are going, and as well as storage costs as well. Firebase isn't costing us anything, and we're getting 14K hits every day. So as of right now, it's fine, but once we start uploading images, it's gonna definitely go through the roof. So we just want to make sure we're managing that properly. And this is kind of how we're doing it, right? We're just when a user clicked, wait, sorry, let me back up a little. Yeah, so we're storing the photo in File Manager right here, and we're compressing that photo to 2%, I believe, 0.2. And then we're just writing that to the document directory. And then once we get that URL, we're just pushing it back to, not pushing it back, but we're calling the create meter image function, which essentially all that does is just allows us to call core data, create the object for that, store the image URL, shot ID, roll ID, camera ID, and just save it to the local phone. So it's great. I mean, it has been working really well for us. We haven't had any issues with it, and yeah, again, I'm very content with the way this turned out as well. So the technical challenges, the light meter, this was the thing that got us the most trouble. Not the most trouble, but more so it was we wanted to make sure we effectively implemented this feature because there's a lot going on here. When you click to press a photo or take meter scene, if you will, which is essentially just taking a photo, what it's doing, it's capturing a reference image, it's calculating the settings that you need for your film photography or for your film camera as well as just storing all the data or capturing all the data. So it's capturing your roll name, the focal length that you use for your lens, the aperture, shutter speed, exposure. I believe I said reference photo, the geolocation, and also the ISO. So it's storing all that as soon as you click the press or you press the shutter button. And all this was built on AV Foundation, which was engineered from scratch. We initially tried using a library for the camera just to for proof of concept, and it worked. It worked fine, but it's very cluttered. So we decided just to start it from scratch, so that way we had control of everything. And once we did that, it worked really well. Essentially, it got rid of everything that we weren't using and just kept everything that we needed. It provides us full customability. So anything that we want to do. So we integrated pinch zoom, tap to focus. I think that might have been about it for now. But essentially, if we wanted to expand upon that, we can without any restraint. So it's been great. And this allows us as well to get all the EXIF data from the photo that we've taken. So essentially, when you take a photo, Apple stores all that metadata for you, and we're just capturing the snippets that we need. And in this case, all we're using from that metadata is the brightness value, and that is what we use to calculate the exposure. So here's a little bit of a sneak peek of like what's going on, right? So with AV Foundation, you have this function photo output on photo, we're converting that into a data file. And then we're passing that to meter scene, which is another function that we have, which essentially all that does is converting that photo data to an its mutable dictionary. And from that, we're able to extract EXIF. And that mutable dictionary gives us the value that we need, which is the brightness value that Apple provides. Every time we take a photo, that brightness value is captured. And with that, we're able to calculate either the shutter speed or aperture based on what the user preferred. And again, it works really well. After that, again, we're calculating the aperture in this case. I I removed the algorithm that we use to calculate it. We'll keep that for us for now, but anyways, but either way, you're able to do it, with that data. And it works again really well. We actually use, I don't know if you guys know anything about cameras, but we use a Leica M6 as our frame of reference for metering scenes. So it worked really well. So with the workflow, right? Like how's this work with everything? Let's say, you go through a roll, you have all your shots ready. Now what? What can you do with that data? With that data, you can actually send it to yourself. And this part is of a little bit of a manual process. We're still working through on creating a desktop application to streamline this a bit. But with that being said, you're able to export all the NOSSAFLEX data or as JSON data, and you'll get an email like this from us saying, here's your role, here's all of your shots that we've taken. And you could use this NOSSAFLEX schema to create something like this in your folder. So these are all the files that I took with that role, right? So I'm just using the NOSSAFLEX data. And with that, I'm able to tell all the metadata from that photo. So for example, this photo that I took here, I shot it on the Cape May roll. It was shot number 3. The shutter speed was 1/25th of a second with the aperture of 32. The focal length was a 90 mm lens and exposure with the +1 overcompensation. And it works really well. And I love this workflow. And I believe that like a lot of film photographers have gotten use of it. There's people on our Discord that love it. There's this one guy in our Discord that has like over 300 roles, which is crazy. Um, yeah, so this is a very specific niche application, but the people that use it love it, and we're very proud of that. And yeah, we believe this could evolve to digital as well, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So quickly going over Apple Entrepreneurial Camp. It was I think it was a 5-day course, and it was great. I learned a lot, but I want to share some of the wisdom that I got from Apple. Great apps raise the bar. It creates a new standard for what will be a great app and resist the urge to take shortcuts. Have interfaces that feel intuitive and effortless. Inclusivity designed for everybody. I think that's a really big thing as well. That's something that we're trying to do as well with following the human interface guidelines. That's why we made it a priority, was for inclusivity. And then this last point I love as well. Demos, interviews, they're all auditions. So anytime you present your application, you want to present it as if you're trying to win a job interview. And that's how I go about presenting my app as well for you guys and just anyone in general. Because it's important, you're basically selling a little bit of your time to use your application. So what's next? What's the future of NOSSAFLEX? I talk about the Android version. There's Skip, the tool that we want to use, but we're not there yet. I thought about using a cross-platform like React Native. My full-time job, I work as a full or a lead React developer, and I like React, but I love Swift. So that's where I'm conflicted. I don't want to use React as my passion project. And then the other option is just creating a full native app. With AI, it's doable, but the issue is I wouldn't know what I'm doing because I'm not an Android developer. So there's that conflict of interest there for me. We also want to work on the paid subscription. That's something we're working on. Revenue cap. Shout out to you guys. We'll keep you in mind for sure because I have no clue how to go about that if I'm being quite honest. But I think what our biggest thing we're working on now is Index, which is a desktop application. We have an alpha version currently, and this is the first time I'm announcing it to the public. That essentially just grabs all your, not grabs, but for digital photographers, you're able to, with our application, you're able to use the metadata for your photos to do something similar to what we're doing with NOSSAFLEX. So you could create file names based off your metadata. That way, you could have it more organized and more meaningful file name structure. And I love that. And I think for me, I'll get a lot of use of that because nowadays I've been shooting more digital than film because film's crazy expensive. But still, that's something that we're working on right now. And that's going to be a paid application. And then the next thing we want to work on as well is marketing. Josh is the head of marketing, but at the end of it, he's more of a designer. I'm more of an engineer, and I want to just focus more on that. And I don't want me not being be in marketing to be an excuse to not learn how to properly market my application. So that's what's next. And then with closing, I just want to share a few ideas. Ideas grow with collaborating with others. I love collaborating with others. I could not have done this without my team. And with feedback from other people as well. I I get in my head sometimes I can do everything, but it's not the case. There's obviously rare occasions like Stardew Valley, developed by one guy. It's impressive, but I encourage you to collaborate with others. Be open to change, and especially with the rapid growth of technology, with AI coming out. I know we have that presentation with the AI. I'm excited to hear about that. Be open to it. And this last quote that I love by Carl Jung: "If you do your work truly and conscientiously, unknown allies will come and seek you out." And with that, thank you. Yep, yep.
Some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has
So,
questions.
Two things about questions. One, I'll ask you to repeat them just so that folks on Zoom can hear them.
Absolutely.
And then two, Charlie has brought some Revenue Cat swag. So if you ask a question, you will get a piece of Revenue Cat swag. All right, questions.
Cool.
You chose Firebase you went from iCloud to Firebase. Why Firebase?
So for Firebase, so you asked me, I went from iCloud to Firebase. So the reason why is because we want to be able to support Android. So in the future, right, we want to develop an Android application. I don't know if iCloud supported on Android. I don't think it is.
I think my real question was why Firebase and not like some AWS or Azure or some other more neutral solution where
Oh, right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
The costs a little better.
For sure, yeah. Because we're a small team. It's a team of three, like I want to focus on iOS development, and Firebase provides a lot of those functionality for me, which is the only answer. Trust me, I prefer to have like an AWS solution, but time, unfortunately.
Is any of the code written by LLMs?
By what?
AI models?
With iOS 26, yes. Yeah, I had some of it written with AI models. Especially with some of the updates with the Glass UI or one of the pickers. If you click on the role name in what was it? The focal length, those pickers were generated AI. But this application started in 2020, so a lot of it was written by, us and the team. Sure. Back there.
Yes, my question is, I have downloaded your application and I feel like it's more for someone like professionally feel like fulfill. So what's the special and unique like I mean like what's the unique thing about your application compared with the other?
So what makes our application unique compared to competitors? Is that what your question is? So I would say our NOSSAFLEX system, because it's an acronym that we created to allow users to easily access your metadata through file names. Absolutely.
You said that you're going to be focusing on like marketing going forward. What like are you planning on doing, and like what have you done so far to get your app out there?
So we barely marketed. Don actually posted on Reddit of when the app first got released, and it blew up like on Reddit, and a lot of it's just been word of mouth. But what I plan on doing moving forward to promote the app with marketing, I have no clue. I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know. So I'm just gonna have to research and like look into it. It's the same thing with the business side of things. I don't know, and I don't like not knowing. So I'm just gonna figure it out. I have no solution to it yet. Absolutely.
How were you able to get into the entrepreneurial camp?
I got an email one day saying, hey, we're looking for cohorts to apply for this. I say just keep your eyes peeled with Apple events. A lot of the times they'll do like one-on-one sessions. You just got to look at the emails. I just happened to look at it. I honestly thought like it was kind of like I don't know. I thought it was something random. I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was gonna be kind of like I don't want to sound rude, but I thought it was gonna be kind of goofy. But like it wasn't. It was far from that, admittedly. It was great. So just look out for the emails from Apple and then yeah, just apply.
Question online.
Oh yeah, of course.
So how much demand is there for cross-platform support? For example, a user who needs access from both iOS and Android.
That's a good question. So for both, I don't know for both, but we've had a lot of requests for Android development. When is the Android app gonna come out? When is it gonna come out? Um, we just haven't had the time to work on it because we've been focusing primarily with the iOS application. So
I think you mentioned you talk to your customers through the Discord.
Mhm.
Have you found like that's the best way to talk to them, or have you found like any struggles with Discord specifically?
no, I think it's great because like it's more personal. Our application is a very niche app, so we don't have like a huge user base. If it was like much bigger, like like big tech or something like that, it would be a mess. But luckily, we have like a very committed amount of like users that can just reach out to us and like, hey, we don't like this new update. Well, we had a user previously like this past week saying, hey, this new update kind of stinks. Can you update it? I'm like, sure. It works for us. I like that kind of communication. I want to keep it there, but if it gets bigger, I'm not complaining either. So.
Speaking of user feedback, so you showed different iterations of your design over the years. Do you get specific, were there big feelings about those different designs?
From going to V2 to V3, no, but this most recent update, yes, because there is one user, the one that has the 300 roles on his database or whatever. Um, he was organizing everything by date, and we updated we added a segment picker on like one of the list views, and we removed that functionality. And he's the one who's like, "Hey, I hate this update. Can you fix it?" And was like, "Yeah, sure, we fixed it." So we added like a date, or what was it, a date column in the segment picker, and we just updated for him. So it works real well.
You said this is your second job? You have two jobs?
Yeah, so I work full time as a lead React developer for a Navy defense contractor out in Belleville, Virginia.
So,
And this is just part like passion project.
okay,
Mhm.
how did you, well, this might be a longer question that would be a different.
No,
topic,
yeah.
but how did you get into having this it sounds like two full-time jobs, and how did this become?
It feels like that sometimes because like I mean ask my girlfriend, she sees me working on it all the time. It's about balance, right? Like finding time for it. The way I manage it is I'll work full time. Like I'll work my full-time job, and then after I get off, I'll work another 2 or 3 hours on it, and then I'll either go to gym, Muay Thai, or whatever, and then come back home and spend time with my girlfriend. But did I answer your question?
This part of it, but how did you get involved in it too?
There's that part of me that always wanted to be an iOS engineer since college. I graduated in 2017 and no one was hiring me. So I was like, I'll hire myself. And then I was like looking for any project, an excuse to work on it. I love photography. I love iOS development. And it's kind of how it started. And I met Don through Reddit because he posted a, a Apple Watch application that he was working on. I was like, hey, dude, let's link up. Let's try to work something here. And it kind of just grew from there.
We're gonna post two more questions.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the core of the app is around photography, and for people who do a lot of photography.
Mhm.
And if somebody who is not a photographer, do you think that there's going to be more features for those people in the future?
It perhaps if we get feedback on what that looks like, because we tailor this to specifically for film photographers in general, right? So I think it would be honestly a beneficial app for beginners as well, because if you don't know how to like dial into settings, the light meter does that for you. It literally you either use aperture priorities or shutter speed priority. You click on whatever you want to meter and it gives you the settings.
Cool. Apologies in advance. I talked to Charlie a lot yesterday, so my throat is a little scratchy. And I'm also a little tired because I talked to him a lot.
I do that.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me here at iOSoho. My first iOSoho was over a decade ago, so it's a pleasure to speak here for a change. Thank you to RevenueCat for paying for all this. And as you can guess, I'm here to talk to you about AI. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I'm Joe Fabasevich, and I go by MergeSort everywhere on the internet. I've been an iOS developer for over 15 years, writing Swift and Objective-C pretty much every day since then. I'm an indie developer, and I spend my days working on an app called Blinky. It's the easiest way to save links for later. It's available on the App Store, and people really seem to like it. I've worked at every size company, from startup of two to internet success stories like TimePop and Bitly. Most recently, I spent 4 years helping build the health client team at Twitter, with a focus on improving misinformation and abuse at a global scale. I'm an open source maintainer, a writer, and these days I'm also a teacher. I help people of all backgrounds, technical and non-technical, learn all about AI in an accessible manner, as we'll be doing here today. I love teaching people about this technology that's emerging in real time and also changing all the time. So I work with individuals and teams to develop highly personalized hands-on workshops. As you can probably guess, I love writing code. I love the art of it, I love the feel of it, and I love what I can make with it. I also love the way that a simple and reusable abstraction tickles my brain, or the personal fulfillment of solving a difficult challenge. Code on its own is interesting, but I also love using code to build products that people love. Don't get me wrong, as an indie, I have to do design, marketing, sales, customer support, and of course, build my product. I love doing each of these things a little less than I love to code, and some a lot less actually. But what I love most is making a real connection with another person through the software that I build. I feel so lucky that I get to build personal, playful productivity apps that make people happy. I'm always moved when a person reaches out to tell me, and that's what drives me to do all the things that I don't necessarily want to do. These are the roles that I take on to enable me to keep doing what I love most. And that's why I'm going to talk to you today about how to use AI for your job as a software developer, to do more of the things that you love most and less of the things that you don't. We'll start by talking about where AI is today and how I use AI in my day-to-day life. Then we'll talk about the technology behind AI and why AI tools work the way that they do. This will help explain why AI will continue to improve and diffuse across the industry, reshaping the way that we all work. Most importantly, though, we'll discuss the techniques that are required for successfully working with AI to accomplish your goals. There's a lot that AI can do today and plenty that it can't. I'm not here to convince you that it's a magical tool that can do anything and everything, which is why I have this disclaimer. As I mentioned, this talk is about AI. People have a lot of feelings about AI, and understandably so. Because I help people learn about AI, I hear all of these feelings all of the time. Some people think that AI can't do very much, and that it's just a lying hallucination machine. Others worship Sam Altman and think that we're building a digital god or something. Much like everything in life, I believe the answer is somewhere in the middle. There are many moral, societal, security questions that we all need to be discussing, and I genuinely wish we were thinking deeply while we were having those discussions. The field is changing very quickly, so few things that I present to you today will be the only approach or the only solution. And while I personally use AI a lot, I'll walk you through how it's been a multiplier for my productivity. I get a lot of utility out of AI, but I definitely do not delegate all of my thinking to it. What remains most important as a software developer and as a person is your ability to think critically to adapt these new technologies. That's why, for the next 30 minutes, I want you to put aside your preconceived notions about AI, regardless of what they might be. I'd love for you to be open-minded to the ideas that I present, and in 31 minutes, you can believe whatever you like again. Promise. I want to start by walking you through a regular day in my life, specifically the ways that I use AI. I start most mornings with a 15-minute bike ride up and down a quiet street where I live in New York City. Sometimes I listen to a podcast, sometimes I enjoy the sounds of the city, but lately I've been opening ChatGPT's voice mode and simply saying, "Teach me something new." Last week, ChatGPT taught me about bioluminescence, a subject that I previously knew very little about. It's a bit like having my own personal Wikipedia on demand. If I don't know something, I just ask. If I find something interesting, I dive deeper down the rabbit hole. And of course, if I'm skeptical about something, I follow through to get more clarity. LLMs are like glossy encyclopedias. The more factual information there is about something in the training data, the more accurate you can expect an LLM to be. There's a lot of highly sourced information about bioluminescence, so I feel pretty good about the validity of what we've learned. You can learn about almost anything. If it's available on the internet, you can probably learn about it. It can be science, it can be history, or even code. Lately, my bike rides have been filled with question after question about recent Swift evolution proposals. I'm not looking for an easy substitute for learning. Building a deep understanding requires practice and hard work. Instead, I'm using a new approach to break down a dense subject by asking the questions that I need answers to. As I'm walking home from my bike ride, I have an idea. I get back to working on my iOSoho talk, and I use AI to build this slide. Every slide in this talk with a chat bubble was made with the little tool that I built in a Claude artifact. The chat bubbles were created to be an exact replica of ChatGPT, but with my talk's color scheme. It was so simple that I built it with these 3 prompts that you see on screen in less than 5 minutes. I didn't have to write any code. I just had to describe my problem and give that to Claude. Artifacts are accessible via the web, so if you want, you can go play with mine or even build one based on it. Now, is this chat bubble generator my life's work? Of course not. It's just a simple tool. But humans are tool builders. Being able to build tools on demand with AI is what makes AI so empowering to a software developer. This XKCD comic about automation used to be a joke, but now it's our reality. Rather than sitting in Keynote all day manipulating shapes until they look just right, I can now automate the process by creating a piece of software. It was only 3 prompts and 5 minutes, but I had exactly what I needed. No code and no thinking required to create a usable and reusable piece of software. Many problems are hard to describe in this, but sometimes it's actually this easy to describe and build something that you need. The cost of making throwaway software that helps you accomplish a specific task is now almost 0. Take a look at these 2 APIs and tell me which one you like more. In the spirit of automation, halfway through writing the second curl request to test Plinky's API, I realized I'm sick and tired of writing curl requests. I could use a GUI tool designed for API requests like Paw or Postman, but it would be even better to have a personalized tool. What if I could simply type create tag iOSoho and AI would create the correct curl request for me? I think about how I can do this, and I have a brilliant idea. I open up Codex, which is OpenAI's CLI tool, similar to Claude Code. First, I ask Codex to read the code for Plinky's API layer to better understand the endpoints that I have. Codex generates an open API spec from the code, so now we have a formal document that describes all of our endpoints and parameters. Then Codex builds a Python script called Plinky API, which also uses Codex to translate my natural language request into the correct API call. The script works by using GPT-5 to analyze my command line input and reads through the OpenAPI spec to determine which of the routes I'm most likely trying to call. Now, when I run this command, it chooses the right endpoint and constructs a curl request to add a new tag with the name iOSoho. I can now test my server much faster without having to keep all of the API routes in my head. If you have a ChatGPT subscription, Codex is included for free. This means that right now, you can build any tool that transforms natural language into something meaningful. I came up with and built this idea in only 15 minutes. Most of that time, I was off doing something else while Codex was writing the code. It took me a couple of iterations to perfect, going back and forth, but that's nothing compared to the time that I've saved since, let alone making my life a little less annoying. That's a big deal. We're at the beginning of an era of personalized on-demand software. That wasn't a lot of work, but it was hard work, so I paused to have lunch with my lovely, supportive wife. I tell her about my brilliant new invention, and she says, "That sounds nice." She's not a developer, so she doesn't get how insanely cool this is. But it's also proof that I don't spend all day talking to AI. It's time to get back to work, so I start on my iOS 26 redesign for Plinky. I've been adjusting Plinky's color palette to feel more modern and to stand out in a world of stock system apps. I realized early on that liquid glass would look better on a creamy white or espresso brown background rather than pure white, black, or gray like many apps choose. The colors that I use will be used everywhere across my brand, so I need to be thoughtful about these color choices. I know the look that I'm going for, and I'll know it when I see it, but I don't want to spend all day trying out endless hex codes to get there. So once again, I turn to ChatGPT, this time to act as a design assistant. ChatGPT isn't a designer, and it's not replacing my design process. But it's a great way to try out a lot of options quickly. I ask ChatGPT to generate 5 color choices. I try out the colors on my device and settle on a slightly different shade. I'm using my best judgment, and I consider ChatGPT's suggestions a great head start. They're not advice, they're advice. They're not requirements. But those suggestions help me not spend all day aimlessly trying to pick just the right color. I then asked ChatGPT to generate P3 variants of our new colors to really pop on an iPhone. This is the perfect task for a computer. It's an algorithmic problem, so why should I spend my time trying to generate the right transformations manually? And lastly, I realized that the purple that I use for reminders is now a bit stale on our cream background. I don't even have to tell ChatGPT the colors in my palette. I just drop my entire color palette in as a file and ask ChatGPT to help find some alternate shades of purple that won't clash. Now that I have these new colors, I have to go apply them to Plinky's landing page. I open Cursor and I tell it to update the website's background color. It does so asynchronously while I'm working on something else. Every app needs a landing page. It used to be that not being an expert in web development would stand in my way. But now, even as an iOS developer, using a technology that I don't know well is no longer a challenge. Previously, I would spend weeks overcoming my mediocre CSS skills to build the perfect landing page, which would still never come out quite right. Now the answer is easy. 3 simple steps. 1, if you don't know what technology to use, describe your problem to your favorite AI and talk through the trade-offs. 2, pick the web development stack that seems best for you, and then share a bunch of websites designs that you like. 3, iterate with AI. Describe what you like about its design, what you don't like, and what it got wrong. Keep nudging it in the right direction, all in plain English, almost no HTML or CSS necessary. And secret step 4. I can't believe this stupid trick works, but when it's all done, have an LLM clean up after itself. Cursor probably wrote some subpar code and didn't realize, but it can read its own code after the fact and identify what isn't good. Simply say, go through our code base to refactor, clean up, and improve the code that you just wrote, and it does. If there's one thing that I believe about AI, it's that AI lowers the barrier to entry for solving a problem. Few things have a higher barrier to entry than Git. I've been using Git for 15 years now, and I still wish I was better with Git, but I still struggle with complex multi-stage problems like this. In my redesign, I've accidentally overridden my previous theme with our new theme. I wanted the old theme accessible to users as a setting. Restoring this theme is very doable, but it's tedious, it's error-prone, and it'll take me about 15 or 20 minutes to get right. Once again, I can simply describe the problem, the context, and have Claude Code fix my screw-up. A big shift occurs with how you work when you only need to explain problems rather than type out solutions. Instead of memorizing or looking up archaic Git incantations, I can work at a higher level of abstraction and get better results. While Claude Code is saving me from my Git mistakes in one tab, I open another instance of Claude Code. I need to think through the last phases of a feature that I've been working on for a few months. Plinky's going to let users start importing their links from other apps like Pocket and Instapaper. Building an indie app means that I now have to do backend work. I'm a smart engineer, but I'm not a backend developer by trade. I can create clean APIs and store data in Postgres, but scaling is a new challenge for me. I do know the things that I need to know, but that doesn't mean that I have a lot of experience doing them. I'm probably going to make mistakes along the way, and I find when that's the case, often what you need is another set of eyes and someone to talk to. Rather than asking Claude Code to write code, I describe a concern I have. I worry that Plinky won't be able to scale to meet the needs of users who have tens or hundreds of thousands of links. This is an example where I, as a developer, know exactly the problems that can arise, but I may not know how to prevent those problems. I have Claude read over the code for my feature and provide an assessment. It makes recommendations, and I understand almost all of them. I'm not afraid to ask questions about the recommendations that I don't understand because I want to learn how to build a scalable system. These are good suggestions, so I learn more about monitoring to make sure that I can catch and fix errors as quickly as possible. Agentic tools like Claude Code are great for helping me get up to speed with new APIs, new libraries, and new subjects. That's how I spend the rest of my workday, learning the tools and technologies that will make me a better developer and help me build a better product. We did a lot today, so I wind down by playing with my ridiculous cat, who is also not artificial intelligence. A lot of talking. One sec. Yeah, that's gonna pull. Okay, good news. We're done talking about me and we're ready to start learning. I've just shown you some of the ways that I use AI on a day-to-day basis, but I barely mentioned writing code. What I did mention were plenty of important parts of a professional software developer's work. I can assure you that in the hands of a skilled developer, writing code is what AI does best. To understand why, we need to break AI down into its fundamental parts. We want to build production software beyond vibe coding, and to do so, we need to understand the fundamentals of AI in a digestible manner. AI is everywhere these days. Some of those are places that people look for AI, like in ChatGPT. But you'll also find AI in places people don't necessarily want it, like at the top of Google search results. There are 3 main modalities for how software developers interact with AI. Chat, like the aptly named ChatGPT, IDEs like Cursor or VS Code, and agentic coding tools like Claude Code, Codex, or Gemini CLI. As you've seen, all of these play a meaningful role in a developer's workflow. So I'm going to make a bold claim to start. From the first time you use ChatGPT, you're being lied to. What's confusing about the name ChatGPT is that it's not made for chatting. I'll give you a second to appreciate that. Instead, I like to think of ChatGPT as the world's best report generator. ChatGPT synthesizes the inputs that people provide it and transforms it into tangible outputs. This is where large language models shine. They're language transformers, whether that language is English, Spanish, or Swift. Being a skilled communicator places you ahead of most people using ChatGPT. Well-articulated inputs lead to higher quality outputs. Otherwise, it's a lot like the expression garbage in, garbage out. I use the term outputs rather than text because you don't always want text back. As you've seen, we can have ChatGPT generate text, files, or most valuably, software. I have a simple rule. Don't talk to ChatGPT the way that you would talk to your bestie. Talk to ChatGPT the way you would talk to a coworker who you want to get help from. That approach will let you more easily tap into an LLM's ability to reason about text and transform it into something valuable. The state of the art in AI coding changes seemingly every month, so I want to ask you about your experiences. Raise your hand if you think you can write better than AI, code better than AI. See, hands still going up. Okay, so let's say 60% of you. You're all wrong. On the one hand, none of you should be raising your hands, but on the other hand, all of you should be raising your hands. The question is incomplete. What does it mean to write better software than someone else? Is it following patterns and best practices? Is it writing performant code? Is it inventing novel approaches? Or is it solving the problems that users have? Of course, the answer is all of the above, depending on the context. A claim that I am willing to make is that I bet on a greenfield project, AI can generate high-quality, production-ready code faster than you. And I bet it can do it in any language, ones you've probably never tried, some you may not have even heard of. You may say, well, I'm not working on a greenfield project, and you'd be right. That's not how most developers spend their time, but it does happen sometimes. As I demonstrated earlier with my natural language curl tool, I think we're going to be building a lot more software on demand in the future. But I do use LLMs in large code bases all the time. It's not just greenfield projects. And I know that they can deliver positive results that make me more productive. And yet, I still want to assert that sometimes an LLM will do the stupidest thing imaginable. So let's take another poll. Right now, Claude Code is the coding tool that people love most and won't necessarily be forever. So feel free to substitute OpenAI's Codex or Google Gemini whenever I mention Claude Code. I'm going to ask a series of questions. So this time, raise your hand and keep it up until the answer is no. Have you ever used Claude Code or Codex or whatever is cool? Okay, keep it up. That's, I want to say, almost 100% of the audience. So let's go round number, 100%. Have you used Claude Code as your main way of writing code for at least 1 week? Hands go down. Have you sat and worked on a prompt for at least 30 minutes? More hands down. How about an hour? Okay, we got like 3 hands up. Have you set up any advanced features like / commands, sub-agents, or custom output styles? Have you used another, I'm looking at you because you were the only person with your hand still up. Have you used an LLM in concert with Claude to guide and review Claude's work? We've got some number, I think you put your hand down earlier, but there's a lot of questions. You're tired, I got you. Gotcha. So
It's a working project.
no one answered 100% yes, which is good. The number of hands kept going down, which means that many of you are not using Claude to its full potential. But that's not a judgment. That's actually a positive. It tells me that there's still a lot of untapped potential for you to improve your agentic coding workflows and get far better results. If I came on stage and I showed you some new exciting feature in the latest version of Swift, half of you would probably start ignoring my talk midway and go out and try that feature. Now, don't ignore my talk, but do adopt the same mindset when it comes to trying out new AI features early and often. So I'm going to say one more thing that is really bold. LLMs are stupid. And many people believe that, but I will explain why. Why do LLMs do dumb things? The answer is simple. LLMs have no mental model. They have no sense of coherence. They're simply a computer program trained to provide the next word in a sequence based on the previous word in that sequence. The word that they provide is based on what they've seen in their training data, which is itself imperfect. This is not thinking. This is a smarter form of guessing. But if LLMs are so dumb, then why am I up here telling you that they can write production-ready code? Because LLMs are just one piece of a complete AI system like Claude Code or Cursor or ChatGPT. They're the part that we talk about because they're a new and shiny innovation, and they truly are innovative. But any meaningful AI system that you interact with is more than an LLM. LLMs generate text, but AI systems add memory, planning, reasoning, and guardrails to give that text context, structure, direction, and purpose. These additional layers provide the foundations for mental models that are missing from an LLM alone. These more complete AI systems have a name that you've probably heard everywhere. They're called agents. The term agent is a bit of a buzzword, but it's not just a buzzword. It's also a design pattern. Agents consist of these 5 constructs working together in one system. We've already discussed what an LLM is, so let's talk about context. When you're solving a problem, the first thing that you ask for is context. Too little, and you can't form a clear mental model. Too much, and you're drowning in details, pushing out things that actually matter. Striking the right balance is just as important for us as people as it is for agentic systems. Then we have tools. You write code in your IDE. This is your tool. But that IDE is built upon fundamental primitives. Your IDE is made with the UI framework app kit, the Swift compiler, the C compiler under that, and all the way down to the operating system, the kernel, and the hardware input pipeline that turns your key presses into code. Coding agents use Unix tools like grep to search through code, cat to read files, and echo to write them. At a higher level, they might call on abstract tools like web search, a code interpreter, or even specialized systems like another large language model to generate and refactor code. This tool usage is what separates an LLM from an agent, the same way that advanced tool usage separates humans from animals. Setting the right goal for your agent is the single most important thing that you can do. The better you define the goal, the better your results will be. The more explicit you are about what an agent should or shouldn't do, the higher the odds an agent will succeed at your task in the way that you envisioned it. Think about when you've been handed a design that leaves out key details. You only discover the gaps while coding, which means rework, frustration, and wasted time. But those gaps, if they're caught early, you know that the wrong thing doesn't get built at all. Vague or incomplete requirements always means more work later on. Whether you're delegating that work to a teammate or to an agent, clarity upfront saves you from surprises down the road. Putting this all together, given a success criteria to achieve the right context and a bunch of tools, agents will run in a loop until they solve the problem that they've been told to solve. Agents don't work like us, and we shouldn't expect them to. They don't reason with a real mental model. They brute force their way to answers. But surprisingly, brute force can work remarkably well. It may not look efficient, but it is in a way that matters. You're not doing the work, the system is, and that frees you to spend your time on something more valuable than just typing out a solution. Thinking even bigger, with clear goals and the right tools, an agent can tackle problems that once required bespoke and hard to build algorithms. This is why everyone is rushing to build agents, and why you as a developer have an edge. You can think systematically and wire agents together in ways that others simply cannot. Now that we have an understanding of the fundamentals of agentic systems, we're ready to start coding. Not writing code, working with an agentic system that will write code for us. Working with an agent is all about planning. In my experience, this is the hardest part to teach. People think and work so differently. Rather than a single prescriptive solution, I want to share a framework for thinking, the anatomy of a plan. We're going to work together to build a hypothetical plan for a hypothetical weather app. The app already shows people the weather based on their location. Now we want to add a feature that alerts a user when a rain shower is expected. Working with AI almost every day for 3 years has helped me define a success plan by these 4 principles: context, description, success criteria, and additional considerations. As you can see from this tweet, context is everything. Context is a story of how you got here and where you want to go. Imagine you're telling a coworker that you need help building this alert feature. What do they need to know before we even begin crafting a solution? To provide good context, we want to share everything that's relevant to the problem that we're solving. To do so, we need to answer these 4 questions. What does our app already do? Why are we building this feature? Who is the user? And what future considerations should we know ahead of time? As I start to gather context for our new alert feature, I realize the scope is too big. What we actually need to do is break the problem down into a subset of smaller problems. Building rain alerts actually requires multiple work streams. It's not just a single linear path. We'll need to register for push notifications in the app. And to do that, the server needs to build infrastructure for sending push notifications. We'll need server-side business logic to generate dynamic copy for push notifications based on the actual weather. We can go even deeper. Previously, the user would simply open the app and the server would make an API call to retrieve the latest weather as needed. Now, we have to rebuild parts of our server to always pull for new data so we can begin sending timely push notifications. Countless more considerations will come up, and that is our context. The context we share will continue to grow the better that we define the feature. Our job is to assemble as much context as we can to solve our problems today and in the future. Nothing is ever as simple as telling an agentic system, build a new feature. We're going to have to work hard to communicate the complexity. This is true for agentic systems as it is for people. If you're talking to a coworker with a lot of background knowledge, they'll understand the nuance and subtleties by filling in details from their experience. But if you're trying to explain the problem to someone new to your company, you often have to provide additional context and be very explicit. That's what working with an LLM is like. They're very smart, but they have a fresh perspective, so you need to fill the gaps in for them. And that is why we build up context for an AI system. Otherwise, AI systems will make a bunch of assumptions that we have to fix later, only after it's made plenty of mistakes. We should pull context in from every source we have. Your code base is an obvious starting point. If you want an agent to write good code, the number one factor that determines success is the existing quality of your code base. This is the opposite of how most people start experimenting with LLMs. They try to vibe code something and are blown away by how much progress they've made so quickly. But then they start to notice that the agent's results don't match their expectations. We're here trying to build production-grade software, so that's not going to work for us. Your results will be much better with your code base if it's well modularized with small files, readable functions, and consistent patterns. These are all the things we've been saying for years as developers are important. But no code base is perfect, so if you don't have that yet, use an agent to help get you there one task at a time. Besides your code, there are many other sources of context. Jira tickets break down the work that needs to be done, which is helpful to AI systems. Your team's Notion and Google Docs should be added as well to provide meaningful product documentation. Designs from Figma provide visual direction, and sharing API docs is the best way to have an agent build a featured spec. You can even include screenshots from other apps that you want to emulate and guide the agent to build something similar. As we continue working, we'll generate markdown documents that contain even more valuable information. Context about your system's architecture, how features work, specific design choices that we've made, and anything that explains an important decision. We don't even have to write this documentation. We can tell an agent to read through our working sessions and write helpful documentation based on what we've done. Then all we have to do is review and edit the results afterwards. Context and description go hand in hand. Your description is ostensibly your prompt plus your context. Our description will be a plain English articulation of our problem statement, while the context is everything that leads to that problem statement. Most people prompt like this, but you need to continue being detailed, describing your problem from every perspective involved, like that. I actually have a lot more to say, but it's very hard to fit an hour's worth of prompting onto one slide. Now that we have a bunch of context, the problem that we described will make a lot more sense to an agent. If we say that we're building a rain alert feature that notifies a user 15 minutes before it starts to rain in their location, the agent will understand why we're building this feature and how it should approach it. Over time, you get used to writing long introductory prompts and going back and forth with your agent to develop a plan. But if you have trouble with that, just ask ChatGPT to help you develop a better prompt. Don't ask your agent for what to do. Give it a starting point and ask it to ask you interrogative questions. As you develop more advanced workflows, you can even start building multiple features at once, like this. For our app, I can build the server's notification architecture in one instance of Claude Code while building the client-side code in another tab. And in a third tab, I'm asking Cursor to provide step-by-step instructions for how to generate APNS certificates so I can start sending push notifications. And this is why planning is so powerful. It's worth the trade-off of spending an hour to document all of this, and that means that an agentic system can do a whole day's worth of work or even a week's worth of coding with only minimal involvement from me. We've described the problem that we want to solve, but what does done look like? You have to be specific with your goals, otherwise you end up with results like this. We've established that we want a user to receive a notification 15 minutes before rain starts with location appropriate accuracy. Success is not just sending a notification. Success has multiple criteria. The first is timeliness. It's important that a user receives this notification 15 minutes before it starts to rain. Not 5 minutes, not 2 hours. Our success metric is properly alerting a user 15 minutes before it starts to rain. The second is accuracy. If it's going to rain in 15 minutes, we have to tell the user. If we don't tell the user and they get rained on, then we haven't succeeded. And the third is annoyance. A sufficiently smart AI would think, well, if I just send a push notification every 15 minutes, the user is never going to get rained on. And that's why it's important to tell an agent what's right and what's wrong. Once we set the success criteria, the agent will do whatever it can to succeed. It's crucial to ensure that an agent knows what success looks like, because that's how we make a non-deterministic system more deterministic. And lastly, we have edge cases, because edge cases are always the last thing a developer thinks about. I'm on stage right now, so this is my location. But people move around. I could be on a bike, I could be on a train, I could be in a car, and I could be walking at different speeds. Maybe I haven't opened the app since yesterday, and I'm in a completely different city now. We can mitigate this edge case by making the server always send a push notification, a silent push notification, to synchronize a user's location before deciding to send a rain alert notification. That right there is exactly the kind of detail that we need to mention in our plans. Otherwise, if we don't, then agent won't be able to build production-grade software without us writing the code by hand. There are going to be countless other edge cases like this, which is true in our usual product development process as well. The process that I've described isn't just writing a documentation, it's thinking. If you begin to build a large production system without thinking ahead, I wouldn't expect to see good results. And if you don't think ahead before asking an agentic system to complete a task, you shouldn't expect good results either. There are unending styles and techniques and preferences for working to construct a plan. Lately, I've been working with Claude in a GitHub issue, so it has access to my code and the ability to generate draft pull requests while we're planning. This is a nice trick that helps make sure that we're similarly aligned about how the code will work, since the code is ultimately what matters. But these best practices change all the time, so you should find what works for you and stay open-minded. One last tip for planning is to add a phrase like this to the end of your initial prompt. This will actually help you work with AI to catch a lot of assumptions that you've made. That will help make sure that you don't miss any important context that an agent needs. You'll find that there's always at least one thing that you didn't consider. Speaking of one thing, I have just one more thing to share. I want to go back to earlier in the talk where I told you that agents don't solve problems like we do. Hummingbirds can see colors that humans aren't even able to imagine. Elephants communicate through the ground by producing and detecting seismic rumbles. Orb weaver spiders capture sound with their silk and use their webs to hear. Sharks can feel electric fields, and turtles cross oceans using the Earth's magnetic field for navigation. Why am I up here rattling off a bunch of animal facts after talking about AI for 30 minutes? Because the way that we perceive the world is grounded in our experiences. Humans have 5 senses, and it's impossible for us to imagine what others would feel like. A shark probably doesn't know that other animals don't sense electric fields because that's all that the shark has ever known. What if we begin to question our assumptions about how software should be built? Maybe it doesn't have to be built the way that it is just because that's the only way that we've ever known. I can't teach you everything about AI. I don't know everything about AI. Instead, I came here tonight for 2 reasons. I wanted to share the foundations of how AI systems work, and I wanted to ask you to imagine that maybe your experience using AI to build software is incomplete. So is mine. Behaviors of AI systems are so emergent that we're all kind of figuring things out as we go. And while I don't want you to abandon everything we know about software, I think it's important to have a little epistemic humility. Humility about a technology that's constantly changing and that none of us had ever used 3 years ago. Thank you all so much for listening.
Good for Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely.
Questions for Joe?
When you start a feature,
Mhm.
can you walk us through like how you architect and how you do the spec for actually the program for the AI?
Yep.
I find that to be like,
Yeah, absolutely. The simplest thing to do is to actually start thinking about the feature and the user involved. So I mentioned there are like 4 questions that I ask myself: who is the user, what are we building, like, and all that, right? So I'm building a reading list feature. and I start by talking through the user experience. And then, even though there's going to be a lot of overlap, I start talking about the backend implementation. I start talking about the front end. And this may take me 30 minutes, 60 minutes, an hour. I guess that's 60 minutes, but 2 hours and so on. And I just keep going. I just keep going until I basically run out of details. And, it sounds very waterfall-y, but the thing is that once you have that context embedded in the system, it's there forever, right? So I may add things. I may go into planning mode. I may continue to like have a conversation, and I may ask Claude or Codex or whatever to write that out to another file so I can keep it. But the idea is that you just offload everything about the feature that you have in mind into the context.
What about that? You work this out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What is written?
Yeah, and the best thing is like if you have code, so very often I will just be like, point it to a file and say, make it like this view, right? Or make it like this controller. Or these agents, they're getting so good at using tools, they will use grep and read through all of your code. And so they will pick up your architecture pretty implicitly. If you have that's why I mentioned like having a well-formatted app, having small files, reusable functions, all that stuff, like that really helps agents do less work in the same way that if you were dropped into a project and you saw patterns, you would immediately pick up on the patterns, and then you wouldn't have to go, what's the architecture? Is it MVVM? Is it, are we using TDD? Or it's like you would figure it out by just kind of reading around.
How much of your codes do you write? How much is AI write? When you're working on a feature, do you immediately reach for AI, or do you have to
Yes.
write something yourself?
I think at this point it's like 95%.
Ask you to repeat it just so.
Oh, yeah. The question was, how much of my code is AI written versus how much of my code is manually written? The answer is like probably 95% of my code these days, if not more, is AI written. But I am very involved in the process, right? I am planning it out as we talked about there. I am also code reviewing everything. Ultimately, I am responsible for what I ship. So I find it's very important. But I will say that, for example, like I have a problem that I need to solve, right? It's like I need to go find out some information about a user, throw away code. I can just have AI build, and it can sit in a scripts folder in my repo. And I can also I can use it, or I can then say, great, I solved my problem. I don't need it anymore. I throw it away. But truly, like on my walk over here, I was just working with Codex and I had it go build a thing. If I don't like the thing it builds, I make it do it again. I try again. There's zero cost for me doing that. I even just like I save the prompt that I used, and then I try again. And I might say like, okay, I liked what you did here, but do it different, right? Like make it use these localized strings, make it do this, or you can continue iterating on the same prompt, right? Whether you're on the go or whether you're at your computer. And so it's just like, I think my rule of thumb is give this kind of workflow a week, like invest a week. It's going to be hard at first, but once you do, you start to reap the benefits of this. And so now I'm not going to like code while I'm up here, but I can if I wanted to, right? I could just start talking to it. And then the more that you build up the muscle memory for it, or the muscle for it, and also you will build up, for example, like an agents.md file that matches your code base. So oftentimes I will tell like, you love to use view controllers, do not use view controllers, right? And it will go, okay, I won't use view controllers. That's me. I used to work at Twitter. He's right. Thank you for downloading Flinky, because that's what happens when you open the app. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to sign up and use Revenue Cat to subscribe.
So follow-up question. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's not to answer though.
yeah.
You said you building muscles for AI or something. Okay, so that's, do you feel like you're losing muscles for writing code yourself? Like, you're not writing yourself?
No, and I mean, like I do, that's what I said, like I write like 5% of the code still, right? And the truth is that there are many things that I've written a Swift UI view at least 500 times, if not 1,000 times, right? It's like, that is probably embedded in like some neurons in my brain, and it will be the last thing I think about before I die. So I do not think that will go away. But no, I definitely, I think it's a valid concern. One thing that I wanted to emphasize in my talk is you should be using critical thinking skills this whole time. And while the critical thinking skills may not take the exact same shape, I do not think that they will go away. Now, if you've never built anything and you dive straight into AI, I think it's going to be a very different thing, right? So I am talking as a person who's written code for 15 years, and I am talking as a person who is an indie, so I am still checking in all the code and looking over everything. It's a valid concern, but I think that I've said this even before we had AI. The most important skill that a person can have is critical thinking, followed by like curiosity and creativity. Just if you keep doing those three things, I think that you will be okay in a world where you are not writing every line of code. I'm just gonna go around there, no offense. Sure.
You mentioned Codex, Claude, like, you have a preferred agent depending on the task, or like, how do you pick which tool you're using?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is like whichever one's best at the moment. Oh, sorry. The question was, I mentioned Codex, I mentioned Claude Code. Do I have a favorite one? Do I have a preferred one for tasks and so on and so forth? Like, how do I choose? Yeah, as a general rule, I now default to Codex. It is just amazing. I do not have words for how much like of a leap and bound improvement, but it is slow. Like it will sit and it will go through code and it will just like, if you have a thing that you want to do fast, I might just reach for Claude Code because I know that it will do well for certain tasks. So like I had to pitch my own workshops, launching them. They're 25% off next week. Build LMS/AI. Highly recommend it. The guy who runs them is great. I had to add a banner that was like launching next week, 25% off. And I was like, I could sit around for 5 minutes and wait for like Codex to do this correctly, or I could just use Claude Code. It will do it in 45 seconds. And so I just went and said, go do this, right? It was like the same prompt. I opened up the terminal and I have a split pane that's like one is Codex, one is Claude Code. So I chose Claude Code. Again, this is also one of those things that you get a gut feel for as you use it. At this point, they're all really damn good. I would recommend trying with any of them. If you're like a person who's like, I really like how Claude feels sparky and nice, then go for that. If you're, I want to feed the Death Star and give OpenAI money, go for it. Whatever you want.
Can you expand more on what context files you're using, what goes into them, like what's your agent MD file or PubMD, what other files do you from?
Yeah, I think funny enough, like people tend to go overboard with AgentsMD where they're like, everything that I've ever learned should go into an AgentsMD file, right? I actually think that you should only add to an AgentsMD file. Oh, sorry. The question was, what do I put in my AgentsMD file, or what is context in general? So I will say that for an AgentsMD, just add things as you go. If you notice that like it runs tests weirdly, tell it to run tests a different way. If you notice that it gets tripped up on something in your code base, tell it to do that and build that up kind of organically. Otherwise, reference files. I had that slide that was like Jira, Notion, Google Docs. I work in an app called Craft, and so I constantly write these like docs that are basically for myself, and then I copy and paste them into there. It's not like a super fancy workflow, but all that matters is what you're trying to describe and that it does a good job of doing that. So, also screenshots. Screenshots are amazing. If you're like, I want it to look like this, or hey, I'm running into a bug and it's like, it's too pink over here, right? There's never enough pink, but it's too pink over here. So you just draw an arrow to the thing that's pink, or even don't draw the arrow. At this point, it's good enough. So anything that you can think of that would help you, throw that into the context window.
Do you keep do you keep separate files for like feature plans?
I used to, do I keep separate files for feature plans was the question. I used to, but you really don't have to anymore. It's kind of crazy. Like even in the last 6 months, so much has changed where I do write out my features in Craft with like, it's like Notion, but like I write them out there. And so that's my own personal version of it. But you don't have to do what people were doing like 6 months ago, like plan file, like plan.md, to-do.md, done.md. Like you don't have to do that. It all just kind of works because it can read your code base and understand the current state of the code base very well. And this is not very talked about, but like last week, I think, Anthropic added what's called a memory tool. And so currently we all use memory by writing to markdown files. That memory could actually be like a database. It could actually be anything really. We've just kind of hacked our way to it by using like markdown files. I very much expect in the next 3 to 6 months, the memory to just continue to get better and better and better, like in leaps and bounds.
Along those lines with prompting, if I understand you earlier, can you go too far with prompting? Can you give it too much information with the prompting, or?
The question is, can you give a prompt? Can you give too much information to prompt? I don't really think so. Like, I mean, there's every once in a while that I'll be prompting something, like I know it's going to misinterpret this, so I just don't include it. But otherwise, no, I think the more detail, the better. And the difference I described that like if you give a human too much information, they will like push some info out. But the difference is that like the token, the context window is like call it 200,000, 300,000 tokens. It has a lot of memory. It has a lot more, it can remember a lot more things than I can. I'll tell you that. So I don't think so. Like if you're wondering, should I give it more detail or should I give it less? The answer is almost always more. Yep.
How do you make code review easier for yourself? So if it's producing mountains of work, weeks worth of work.
Yeah.
And you might get functional, right? How do you help yourself review that code before ship it out?
Yeah. The question was, how do I do code review if it's producing a lot of code? How do I manage all that? The truth is the old-fashioned way. I open a Git editor and then I just look through it and I go, huh, that looks nice. And then I go, no, I really don't want to do that. And then I spend more time in my Git editor than I do in Xcode, and I spend more time in Xcode than I do looking at the code in VS Code per se or something like that. So yeah, the answer is I think that there will probably be a point in time where I can just trust it a lot more implicitly. I suspect that I'm making, pulling out of my ass predictions, but like 6 to 12 months probably, where I can feel very confident. But right now it's confident enough that I'm like, I should probably still look over it. But if I merged it in, I'm pretty sure it would work just fine. It just doesn't catch the nuances. Like I'm very particular about the app that I build. It's an indie app. It's made with a lot of love. It's like a thing that I care about, the connection to my users, and I just don't want to violate that trust. But I don't mind building it faster and then having a bottleneck be me in that regard. But I don't know, like the same way that, there are lots of other bottlenecks in the development process that then go away over time as you work with a team, or whether you like decide I'm just going to adopt Apple system guidelines and let it write whatever, the way that we do that, where we don't make a conscious choice. We're just like, it's easier than thinking up our own design language. So people make trade-offs all the time. There are people out there who are like straight up vibe coding their way to $1 million, and it's the unfortunate reality, but like software is being built by people who do not know how to code. And your advantage, I do not think you will vibe code the next Google, but you may vibe code the next Be Real or something like that. Albert?
Hi, nice talk. Two questions. That's a part question. As you're doing more and more AI stuff right now, like I feel like it's like checking in less code in a repository and checking in more like prompts, like a prompt repository now. But also, I'm curious on your thoughts of like how you organize your prompts and the stuff that you've collected over the time, and also. We also use GitHub Copilot, and obviously it has agent modes and all that stuff, but it also has something that's called a chat mode, which obviously you can like segment different like modes or types of agents and have like more of a back and forth workflow. Curious if you use that much, or how do you like organize or segment your workflows amongst your like different agents or prompts?
I think there was 3 questions, so I'm going to try and remember which was the first question. Oh yeah.
Like a repository, or you did this.
Yeah.
Repository, or you have some other
the first question is, how do I organize my prompts? Like, do I have a prompt repository or something like that? The main answer is that like I do all of my planning in Craft, which again, like it's like a Notion type app. And so I keep the initial prompts over there. And the nice thing actually about Codex is that your prompts are stored in the cloud, is like your conversations are stored in the cloud. So I've just deferred to that. I think that that's a luxury as an indie that is not like, if I was working on a team, I would absolutely be checking my prompts. I would be including them in the pull requests as well. I think that it's really important to pull requests are about understanding how the code came to be. And if you're using AI, then prompting is a big part of that. And I believe the second part of your question was like, how do I utilize like a chat experience? Like in GitHub Copilot, there's a chat, and how do I actually, what's my workflow for that, right?
How do you break apart like your different types of tasks or different types of agents, right? You have agents that might do different like focus tasks.
Yeah.
Do you break it apart that way, or?
Yeah. And so the way that I break apart the work that I'm doing is often by making sure that they do not overlap code, right? So I could be running like 5 tasks at once. But if they're all trying to write over the same file, then you will end up in chaos, right? The same way that like if you're in code review and you have like 3 people working on the same file, you just say, do not do this, do not touch this stuff. And so for me, there's a very natural split of backend work and client work, or client work and then code in this internal package, or code that I'm working on an open source repository, or working, in my case, like working on my website, take my workshops. And so, yeah, I think that that's the most organic way to split up the work that you do, is by making sure that they do not cross the boundary of each working against each other. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. So something that I like when I use AI, maybe I'm not as good as prompts as you, so I find myself like debugging a lot of the code.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how much time, like with your experience, how much time do you spend like doing debugging, and like where do you prioritize like unit testing basically?
Yeah. So the question is like, how much time do I spend debugging the code that I write, that I don't write, that AI writes? That's a good question. I can't tell if the AI models are getting smarter or I'm getting smarter, or a combination of both. I think truly like the models are getting smarter. I also have gotten better at talking to them, right? This is why I emphasize like practicing hands-on and just giving in for a short period of time. You really do develop a lot of muscles. And I think a lot of people who are programming, like are mid-level or senior, have already forgotten how hard it was when you were first starting out, that you just didn't know how to do this. You would get tripped up on semicolons, or you would build classes that were 2,000 lines long, and then someone tell you that's bad. You go, why is that bad? And here we have like an invisible compiler, right? So it's even worse. But I do think that the amount of time that I spend debugging continues to go down. The amount of time that I spend prompting or learning the skill of better prompting. And like prompting is such a weird term because it just sounds like it's like anyone could prompt. But it's, there's a term flying around called context engineering. And it's really like, can you communicate your thoughts clearly in a way that someone without context can actually build the thing that you want to build? And I don't know, I think like if you were, for example, at a company and you were a team lead and it was your first time being a team lead, you would do worse than if it was the 5th team that you've led. And similarly, I think that the same applies here, that your job is ultimately communicating what you're trying to build. And you start to learn, like, for example, when I said like use screenshots, right? It's not a thing that's intuitive necessarily. It's not a thing that people reach for. Or there is what's it called? The Gemini has a video model. So you could probably reach for that and say, go take this video, throw it into Gemini, and then get it back and use that as part of your prompt in Codex. So using tools that use tools that use tools starts to become a more natural thing. And so like, yeah, I think that those skills just develop organically over time, the more that you use them. And I think that it's not just trial and error. I definitely recommend reading online about best practices. There are a few people that I would follow on X. I can, throw off a list in a little bit. They're the ones who are pushing the boundaries on this, because online, I will say, you will find a lot of people who are like, the 7 steps to building stuff without ever knowing how to do anything. But AI will do it all if you just include these like 10 files in your app. And that stuff like works, but it doesn't actually build understanding. Courses like mine. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So I think that truly like it's about building intuition. And so this is not a pitch for my course, but like workshop. But like what I do is you bring an idea and then we build it in 3 hours. And the thing is that we get through a lot of the hurdles that are mistakes that's so commonly made. So it's very hard to answer like, how do I get better at X? And the answer is like, truly it's like guided learning, right? Or and that guided learning to be self-guided. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be a teacher. It could just be self-guided learning by, there's a few good books that I can recommend. There's actually plenty of videos on the subject matter that are like from good authoritative sources that I would super recommend. I have a whole, because people ask a lot of these questions, I keep a doc of every article that I've read that was very useful. And then I just like send people that stuff all the time because I'm like, it's very hard the internet is wide and large, and you should save all of your links in Plinky. But I think that it's really hard to differentiate like, a poser from like someone who knows what they're doing.
Want to be mindful of time. I see 4 hands up, so let's do 4 more questions.
Okay, yeah.
This might be a little bit too pragmatic, or I think a dog that's going to, how to think and wisdom. but seems like you're an iOS engineer, right? Or you're working on iOS stuff.
So
So I'm wondering what MCPs, turn out to be helpful for your interaction with the, that particular environment. Yeah.
So the question is, what MCPs are practically helpful? The answer is almost none. MCPs are much better replaced by using CLI tools. So I know RevenueCat has this MCP, and I think what's good about stuff like that is that they help direct you to somewhere in a more authoritative manner. But just as equally good these days is dropping in a link to documentation. I have so often built a tool by simply pointing it to a blog post and saying, go read this blog post and then go build this tool. That's bonkers, right? And the thing is, like, you don't need an MCP, you need context. And MCPs, the reason that I do not recommend them generally, you have about 200,000 tokens in your context window. The GitHub MCP alone uses 50,000 tokens. So that is 25% of your context window is gone, even if you never use GitHub, but you have the MCP loaded. But if you just drop in some documentation about how to use the GH CLI, it'll be just as good. And so you will save, and this is like more on the esoteric practical stuff, like almost never. The only MCP that's good is Playwright because it is doing a thing locally that you can't do, and that's only for web development, so it's not particularly useful for iOS. I truly can't think. I mean, oh, actually, there's one actually. Like, if you want to build stuff, like if you want to Xcode build, yeah, that stuff is good, but also you can still point it to CLI stuff and have it better. The only thing you can't do is test, which is kind of touched on your question, but like, it still sucks at testing, which is great because I don't write tests. But no, I'm kidding. No, I have to basically just like finagle it to be like, I will mainly. This is the one place where I'm like, I'm not proud, but I will just yell at it and be like, do this testing better. Yeah. The question is, how do I deal with reaching the context window at the end of an important task? That's one place where I will reach for writing out to a file. So if I notice I'm like close to the context window, I will just tell Claude or Codex or whatever to go read through our conversation, take out the important parts, throw them into a file, and then start a new chat and load up the file from that. And that actually saves you hundreds of thousands of tokens because they can pick. Yeah, so I like never let it reach the end. Usually alerts you it's like 20% of your context window left, 10% of your context window. When I get to something like that, I don't know, it's like your car's running out of gas. You go fill up, right? I'll just be like, grab everything that's important here and then throw it into a markdown file based on what you think is important from this chat. And one actually nice thing that the new tools do is they will auto compact, but only the tool calls. So if you imagine you're going through a chat, you're building something in a chat, right? In like Claude Code or Codex. And it then goes and runs, Xcode build to build your app. And that's like 20,000 tokens. But that's not important for like what happens at the end of the chat. So what these tools do now is they start by auto compacting just the tool calls. And then they will say, fine, like now I'm really running out of context window. And then they will just say, I'm done. I'm not gonna like auto compact stuff. To get ahead of that though, just say, hey, I would like to summarize this chat and write it to a file called like, I don't know, my feature, blah, blah, blah chat. And then have it start a new chat and say, okay, like we just left off our work here. Can you pick back up from here? And then it will also read the code, understand what you have done, what you haven't done, and have the summary of what was done in its own language, and then it will pick back up.
I have two questions actually. First one is, like on a daily basis, if you're using a lot of AI and more for debugging, how do you maintain your hands-on coding, or do you think it's not even required at this point in time?
I mean, the question is, how do I maintain my hands-on coding skills if I'm using AI so much? The truth is, like, I still love code, right? And I still want to be good at coding. So there are parts that I will open up and I will do code where I need to do code, or I think it's just, here's a question. Like, if you were a manager, they would be like, how do you maintain your coding skills? And the answer is like, you have to practice, right? You have to try. If you want to do it, you do it. And the answer is yes. I think people talk about like, will we need to write code in the future? And will we need to like, how will we need to be technical? The answer is like, you will absolutely need to be technical. I think that if you want to build anything meaningful. Now, there was a world where like, for example, the CLI tool that I built to automate like, my API requests, I didn't need to know the code for that. I just needed to know that it works and it worked reliably and it worked well. That's great. But my app, for example, it has like, there's 100-something thousand lines of code, and it's important for me to know what that code is, but it's not as important as I thought for me to know what every little line of code in that app is in a way that is like regurgitatable at any moment. And I worked at Twitter previously when it was still Twitter. And we had a 2 million line code base. And I just didn't know every line of code. And that was something that I accepted. I accepted that I would have the skill to read through the code and understand it. And that's where being technical is important. And being able to read code is important. And being able to really like demonstrably explain what you're going for, what your code is at a higher level is also important. I'm sure that you don't think about the assembly code that is the underpinning of the Swift that you are writing. And I do not think that like, it is very good I took like a assembly class back in college and I was like, this is good. I got a C, but whatever. But like, it's good that I took the class because it taught me something valuable about what's happening under the hood. So I think that we're probably going to see something like that, where it's like, if you really want to be a technical person, like a really technical person, you're still going to have to know how to code. And yeah, to answer your question, I still like code. I still read about code. I do all that stuff.
The second question is, like somebody mentioned about giving more or less details to the AI, right? So do you think from a security standpoint, if we give more and more details, it is going to be a problem from a security standpoint, or is it like totally fine?
If I give more
and more details to, like, let's say ChatGPT or GitHub or whatever, like give more and more details. So do you think from a security standpoint, it's a concern in any way?
I think the question is there a security concern by giving more and more details?
Yeah.
Well, I don't give it my social security number, so like that's a start. No, I mean, I think there's a trade-off, right? It's like I basically have said like you have access to my code, and there's like an agreement that OpenAI will not train on my code, and like who knows, but that's the agreement that we've made, and I send them money and they send me a service. I can't say, I think from like, I don't think there's an inherent security risk to giving them my code. I think there are security risks around, for example, using MCPs, where prompt injection and like remote attacks are real. And that is one thing that I do not do. I don't use anything that allows prompt injection attacks to happen. And for example, I'm building AI assisted search into Plinky. So you save like 1,000 links and you can be like, oh, what was that link about the elephant that I read 6 months ago, right? And it will be like, great, like here's that link. And also it might pull out a specific paragraph. It's like, this paragraph is about elephants and this is probably what you were thinking about, right? I have to be really careful about how I architect that from a technical perspective, because I have to avoid man in the middle and prompt injection attacks to say like, this is a real problem. So it's really important to think about security, but I don't think there's anything inherently insecure. And funny enough, like a week ago, I was building some project in Codex and it was like, hey, you accidentally left your environment token in here. You got to go change that right now. So it's pretty interesting that they're like reasonably smart about this and they themselves have incentive to not want to know anything about you, because there's like a malware attack that people who have Claude code installed on their computer right now, if you download like a bad NPM package, it will then just like traverse your file system to use Claude code to send Bitcoin to it, which is like, of course, Bitcoin and NPM, like the two worst things ever invented. And so that all makes sense. And so you should be careful. I'm not here saying like, give every security privilege you want, but I think inherently like working with AI is not a problem. Yeah.
You mentioned using AI to build tools, sort of helping you out doing this.
Yeah.
Can you speak to doing testing for mobile? You've done what, if anything, have you done specifically to test on mobile for mobile, that type of thing?
Yeah, the question is, what have I done or built to test on mobile? The answer is it sucks. I wish it was better. It just flat out sucks. I do not have to expand on that. I don't have great answers. I think the answer is I tell it to run Xcode build and I tell it very specifically. And then there's a bunch of stuff that someone showed me that was like, run it with these arguments and it works 90% of the time. And I was like, great, I don't understand a thing about this, which is proof that it doesn't have to be AI related for me to not understand anything about it. Yes.
Have you used AI and then like all these context, all these things, like use that other model to give you the code? And then use some other models without any context, without anything to do the review on the information?
Are you saying, have I used AI to build something and then used another AI with like a fresh context window to review it? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like a very valuable technique is, that's what I mentioned with like cursor is like, go open up a new tab and say like, review this code and then like fix it, right? Using multiple AI in concert, which no one put their hand up for that. So I'm confident that no one's done it here, but that's a real valid technique is there's a more formal practice called LLM as a judge, which is like LLMs are biased about their own stuff, but other LLMs are not biased about other LLM output. And so you can use LLMs to judge work. And that's actually just a really good idea.